Christie, you're already 100% charged.
Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, March the 2nd. This is the Moscow City Council regular meeting, and I will turn it over to Dan.
If you'd all please join me and the mayor and the rest of the council in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, the first order of business, number one, is the consent agenda. Dan?
I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, I will give Dan made the motion to approve the consent agenda as is. Jim Boland seconded that. I will start to roll with Walter.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, we'll move on. That is 6-0. Item number 2 is the Arbor Day proclamation that I will read.
Early.
Yeah. Arbor Day proclamation. Whereas in 1872, Julius Sterling Morton, who became the Secretary of Agriculture under President Grover Cleveland, proposed to Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas a resulting holiday, Arbor Day, was first observed in the state with the planting of more than 1 million trees. And whereas Arbor Day is now recognized throughout the nation and the world, reminding us of one person's initiative can make a lasting and meaningful difference, and whereas the City of Moscow and the Moscow Tree Commission are committed to a community forestry program that supports a safe, healthy, and attractive urban forest, and whereas trees are renewable resources that yield fruit, nuts, food and profit, wood for construction, fuel for warmth, paper products, and a wide variety of other goods and materials. Whereas, when properly selected, planted in the right places, and tended appropriately, trees increase property values, add beauty, enhance economic vitality of business districts, cut heating and cooling costs, and provide buffers from traffic. And whereas trees intercept stormwater, reduce runoff and erosion, clean air and water, produce oxygen, slow climate change by absorbing carbon dioxide, provide habitat for wildlife, and moderate air temperature, and whereas a healthy urban forest can bring a sense of vibrancy, a respite, adventure, or calm, escape or contentment, and connection to wild nature amidst asphalt and concrete, and whereas Arbor Day remains the timeless observation by its founder, J. Sterling Morton, that each generation takes the earth as trustees. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lambert, for the City of Moscow, do proclaim April 24, 2015 as Arbor Day in the City of Moscow, and I urge all citizens to support the planting of trees to promote the well-being of this and future generations. And I do have David Rolk from the Tree Commission here that I'd like to present this to. I got to share a little story about David last year at Arbor Day when we planted a tree. This guy dressed up and he had cedar boughs all over, sticking out everywhere. Did this in front of a bunch of first and second graders. Which, you got to remember something about kids is, you got to kind of animate to make things happen.
We want to get this story on the public record.
Yeah. Come on over here. Well, David dressed up, as I said earlier, and we were in front of a bunch of first and second graders at West Park School, and one of the things you have to do with kids is they have visual things, and Dave looked absolutely terrific. It was, and I was very, very impressed with that, Dave, and I tell that story a number of different times. So thank you very much for your efforts and your work.
You bet. Thanks for the proclamation and the support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll get a picture up here. Look up to Gary.
I get you to get away from the whiteboard.
How's that?
And we need to take 2. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. You bet. Appreciate it. All right.
Okay, moving on to item 3.
Did you mention that item 6 was being?
I have not yet. I guess this is as good a time as any before I move forward. Item 6 on the agenda, the 1912 Center Annual Report, Heart of the Arts, will not be presented tonight. It will be presented in 2 weeks because Jenny Kostroff got stuck back east and her flight got canceled, so she couldn't be here on time. So we will be seeing this in 2 weeks, folks. Okay, now I'll move on to item 3, which is Staff Recognition Report by Gary Reedner.
Thank you, Your Honor. We are honored today I am, to announce that Elisa Anderson, our grants manager, who happens to be here tonight, was appointed by Jerry Whitehead, the chairman of the Idaho Transportation Board, to be the District 2 representative on the Public Transportation Advisory Council. That advisory council advises the Idaho Transportation Board on public transportation issues, and she's been appointed for a term of 1 year. So congratulations to Elisa. That's a great honor.
Very nice. Congratulations. Thank you, Gary. We'll move on to item number 4, which is mayor's appointments, and I have 2 tonight that I'd like to present to the council. Stetson Holman for Fair and Affordable Housing Commission. This is a college voting seat that expires 12/31/2015. And Louisa Graydon, Human Rights Commission. This is a high school non-voting seat that expires also on 12/31/15.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we accept the appointments.
I second him.
Okay, we've got a motion by Dan to approve, second by Art. I'll start the roll with John.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Stetson and Louisa. Either one of you here tonight, would you please stand? Would you like to say anything to us?
I worked with
Come on over here. Come on over here. Come on over here, Stetson.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. So, I worked with the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission earlier this semester on 2 projects about informing college students of unfair housing practices. It went really well for the most part, and I'm excited to work with the commission on future events throughout the next year. So I'd like to thank you guys for approving my appointment.
Thank you very much, Stetson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that we do, and I as a mayor appreciate, I like seeing college kids get a chance to sit on some of these boards. It's very important. I also love to see high school kids learn some of the civic duties early and beyond them as well, because I think that's very important, not only as a community but as a culture as we go along. So thank you again. Okay, we will move on to item number 5, which is public comment and mayor's response period. If anybody would like to speak. And I will respond to something at the last council meeting. I had 2 letters that I read to the council and to the audience out there for 2 young female 3rd graders at Lena Whitmore School that had some interesting things that they wanted to propose. One was a new pet store. The other was some additions to our Parks and Rec department, which those things were passed on to Dwight Curtis. And I had the delight of the following day taking those letters to Lena Whitmore School and reading them to the 3rd grade class, which was Mrs. Ringo, and it was very nice. And I like it. I love to get a chance to talk to kids about civic duty and stuff, so it was a very fun thing for me to do. So I very much look forward to doing those types of things. Okay, with that, I'll move on to item number 6, which we said we'd skip, and we will be bringing that back in 2 weeks to the next council meeting. So now we're going to move on to item number 7, which is a public hearing, proposed amendment of Title 4, Chapter 3 and 11 regarding light manufacturing. Mike Ray is the presenter. Mike, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. Before you tonight, we have a legislative amendment, and that's to Zoning Code Chapters 3 and 11. And this is in regards to light manufacturing. Within the zoning code, we have 2 types of manufacturing, light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing. The definition of light manufacturing is the manufacturing, compounding, treatment, processing, assembling, packaging, or testing of goods or equipment. So really broad definition there. Heavy manufacturing is a lot more intense. It's extraction, processing, treatment of raw materials, as well as handling, storage of explosive or radioactive materials or products. That's only allowed within the industrial zoning district right now. Looking at light manufacturing, it's permitted use within the RTO and industrial zones, as well as the motor business zone, which is a special use permit in order to achieve a light manufacturing use. Urban mixed commercial is a conditional use permit, and so special use permit and conditional use permit are essentially the same thing, same criteria for approval and everything. Taking a look at prior special use permits, and these are only within the motor business zoning district that we've issued for light manufacturing over the last 10 years. You have welding, you have raft frames and throw rope manufacturing, Biketronics, which is aftermarket Harley-Davidson electronic parts. These are conducted wholly within enclosed buildings. That had to go to the Board of Adjustment twice to get a special use permit, one up on North Almond Street and another time on their current location on Palouse River Drive. We've had businesses involved in the fabrication of parts, tools, and archery, woodworking shop on West Morton Street, as well as gift seed theme garden products and packages. So essentially placing garden seeds within packages and shipping those off. Some of the issues we as staff currently experience with light manufacturing is that, first of all, it's got a broad definition. It covers a lot of potential uses that could go in that may not have an impact on adjacent properties. And the majority of these light manufacturing uses are within the motor business zone, like I listed previously, which requires that special use permit in order to achieve. But it also requires all these uses to be within enclosed buildings. That's part of the limitations on uses within the motor business zone. So all light manufacturing uses are required to be within enclosed buildings that would be less of a detriment on adjacent properties. And then going through the SUP process, it's essentially meant to make sure the use doesn't affect the public life, safety, welfare, as well as to mitigate any potential nuisances that the use might create. And so within enclosed buildings, some of these uses, really there's no nuisances in order to mitigate. And so coming to the Board of Adjustment, they're faced with going through that process and not really having a whole lot to review. A lot of the site and building plans, those are reviewed administratively when they pull a building permit and go through that permitting process, and so staff already achieves that. The Board of Adjustment will take a look at that as well when they go through that process, but it's really meant for staff review. It also costs the applicant time and money, about 3-4 weeks to go through the process, as well as a monetary fee to do that. So as part of this, staff had taken a look at some other municipalities, how they deal with manufacturing and specifically light manufacturing. We had taken a look at Pullman, Lewiston, Post Falls, Boise, Coeur d'Alene, as well as Spokane. Most had nuisance languages included within their definitions. And most of them allowed light manufacturing uses by right in motor business type zones. And so what staff's proposing is that within the definition of light manufacturing, we retain the same language that currently exists, but add on some other language. So the total definition would say the manufacturing, compounding, treatment, processing, assembling, packaging, or testing of goods or equipment that is primarily indoors and which does not present any adverse effect upon surrounding property from smoke, noise, vibration, dust, glare, air pollution, or water pollution. So what we're doing is taking that nuisance language and adding that to the definition in order to have essentially staff administer the definition and make sure the uses that go in light manufacturing type categories are abiding by the nuisance language. What we'd also do is shift special use permit under the motor business zone to have light manufacturing just be permitted by right. And so they wouldn't have to go to the Board of Adjustment, and they wouldn't have to go through the special use permit process within motor business. And we'd also add light manufacturing as a use, a conditional use, under the general business zoning district. And so that would go to the Board of Adjustment as part of that process. And the reason why we're proposing a conditional use permit within the general business zone is generally these GB zones is in close proximity to downtown, so you may have instances where a little bit tighter of a traffic configuration, more pedestrian activity. There's also areas where it's adjacent to residential development, and so I think that introducing those types of use adjacent to the core of downtown as well as residential areas, you'd want some sort of mitigation through the Board of Adjustment, and that's why it's a conditional use permit under general business zone. Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct a public hearing, and that was on February 11th, and they recommended unanimously that approval to City Council. And so staff's recommendation before you tonight is to conduct a public hearing, and after considering testimony, approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and then it be read by title and published by summary. I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from Michael? From council? I think we're okay, Mike.
Okay.
Okay, I will open this public hearing at 7:16. I would take testimony in favor. Seeing nobody rush to the podium, I will take testimony, general testimony or opposition. Going once, going 2 times. I will close the public hearing. And I will refer to John. John, you were a liaison to planning and zoning when they passed this on the 25th. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, this particular issue has been gone through real thoroughly, first by Mike in his preparation and trying to nail down all of the separate aspects. He's done a good job on that. Excellent. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission itself went through the process at length and sent him back a couple of times to change a few things, and he did so, came up with the resulting piece of work, and I think we ought to pass it. It was passed by the Planning and Zoning, like he said, with no opposition, and I think the work that's been done by the city staff and then reviewed by Planning and Zoning warrants passing it. And if you're ready for a motion, I'll make one.
Go ahead if you wish. We'll discuss it too, John. So,
well, I would approve the ordinance under the suspension, move that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
okay. We've got a motion by John and a second by Wayne to approve under the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings that be read by title and published by summary. Discussion amongst council?
I think it's a really nice, tight bit of language there. It's not overly restrictive and certainly accommodates light manufacturing and makes it a whole lot easier for people to access that type of work on their property. I think it's a good ordinance.
I agree with you. I was on Planning and Zoning when this was initiated, and I felt like anything we can do that encourages people to have a business where they make something rather than just sell something is a good fit for this community, and we should probably approve it.
And I agree with everything that's been said. This is the kind of common sense legislation that I really like to see. I wish we could have seen this a long, long time ago. You know, a lot of times this doesn't come up because it just isn't thought of. And once it comes up, then we realize, yeah, we need to do that because it makes sense. So, vote on it.
With that, I will start the roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay, and it's 6-0, passes unanimously, and we have ordinance number 2015-04. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title IV, Chapters 3 and 11, to redefine light manufacturing to be allowed within the motor business and general business zoning districts, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. With that, I will move on to item number 8, which is America's Best Communities ABC Prize campaign, and Gary Reedner and Elisa Anderson will be presenting. Gary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. What you have before you tonight is a request by staff to act as the facilitators and staff support for the application by the City of Moscow, jointly with the City of Pullman, or at least in conjunction with the City of Pullman, in favor of the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport to apply for the America's Best Communities contest, which is being presented or sponsored by Frontier Communications and Dish Network. Elisa will go over the particulars of the application. Suffice it to say that it is something we've known about since last fall. Looking at the type of contest that it is, it's not a grant per se. It's not like the federal or state grants that we pursue. It's actually a contest sponsored by those two entities I mentioned to go identify America's best communities and grade them or evaluate them on a set of criteria that Elisa will go over in a few moments. The airport board was presented. Martin Urkala, who's the regional manager with Frontier, presented to the airport board and some other entities about consideration of applying for this contest. As you know, and the mayor knows and the council knows specifically, as we covered it in our budget many times over the past year, the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport has a runway realignment project, which has been approved by the FAA. It's an $89 million project. The match of 8.125% could rise as high as $9.2 or $9.3 million local match. That local match is something that the two sponsors, which would be the City of Moscow and the City of Pullman, have to verify or at least stand behind. So the City of Moscow has committed to $2.5 million over the next 5 years as our portion of the match. City of Pullman is in the process of making that same commitment. We're also requesting participation from the universities, the counties, universities being Washington State and University of Idaho, Whitman County, Latah County, the Port District, and perhaps some private interest as well to get that match together. As you know, the airport project will allow, if we don't proceed with the airport project, we've been told by the FAA that our exemption for commercial flights will be terminated, and we will lose commercial flights in and out of Moscow, or Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport. Try to have the official name here. We've been calling it Moscow-Pullman for so long. On this side of the line, I don't want to get anybody confused. So at any rate, this would help the contest parameters, as I said, Elisa will go over. Ultimately, and there's kind of a tiered approval process in the contest. The ultimate prize, if you qualify for it, is $1 to $3 million, which would help us a lot in meeting our obligations for the runway realignment project. It does have elements that talk about values to the communities as well as economic development, so on and so forth. So again, Elisa will go forward with that. I'll talk a little bit about the coalition concept, and that is, as you know, the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport Board, Mayor Lambert sits as the vice chair of that board, and Glenn Johnson, the mayor of Pullman, sits as the chairman of that board, and then we have representatives of different entities from both the Washington and Idaho sides of the line. The mayor of Pullman has indicated that he is in support of applying for this contest for the benefit of the airport realignment project. Mayor Lambert has indicated his support as well. We brought it through to the administrative committee last week. The administrative committee indicated that they were in support of it and wanted us to bring it here. Right now, Elisa, being the most experienced grant manager that we have among all the entities, will be charged with facilitating and writing the application. The application requires that as Elisa will explain in a moment, I don't want to steal too much of her presentation here, but it's available for municipalities that are over 9,500 in population and less than 80,000 in population. Both Moscow and Pullman separately and together meet those requirements. It also requires the involvement of a nonprofit entity to actually make the application. Once that nonprofit entity is identified, then the application can proceed. There needs to be a signed letter from the mayor of the municipality that's filed with the contest folks as well. So not only does a nonprofit have to move forward, but the municipality has to show that it is behind it as well. So the nonprofit entity that has consented to be the kind of lead entity on this project is the Moscow Chamber of Commerce. Gina Truscio, the Executive Director of the Moscow Chamber of Commerce, is here. I'm sure she'd respond to any questions that you might have as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Elisa. She's got a pretty comprehensive overview of the project and what it means, at least as far as staff time and community time in making the application. Thanks, Elisa.
Is it that turns this on?
Hey, there you go.
Perfect. Okay. So I see my graphics aren't showing up yet. I guess I'll just go forward and see. There we go. I thought of the aquifer with this water on here. I thought, what a great graphic. Yeah. All right, so America's Best Communities, and this talks about the members who are going to come together to join in the contest. It's the cities of Moscow and Pullman, the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport, and then Moscow and Pullman Chambers, but the Moscow Chamber is the lead agency for us as the nonprofit. The America Best Communities, as Gary said, is sponsored by Frontier Communications and Dish Network, has put together a multi-stage 3-year contest, and it's to encourage communities to collaborate, and their focus is being committed to economic vitality and entrepreneurial spirit. The ABC program is called an Innovative Approach to Competition. And first I'll go over the what of it. The ABC campaign is dedicating $10 million in cash and rewards to support and inspire creativity and innovation that transforms communities and results in long-term growth. The grand prize is $3 million, and there are 27 states that Frontier provides services in that have cities that will be participating. And their goal is challenging these communities to dream big and improve lives. So again, we already discussed the where of it, and Gary discussed the populations. Smaller cities can combine to make the 9,500. We were asked, could the counties join in on this, and if we did, it would put us over the 80,000. So the Moscow-Pullman population together is a good fit for it. And again, they're wanting to focus on changing lives of the citizens in these areas. So the who that will make up the team that they're looking at are cross-sector teams consisting of local business people, change agents. I think that's kind of a new terminology in this field. And or local governments can compete. The lead team member must be a nonprofit, which is our Moscow Chamber. And then the application also has to be supported by 3 to 5 local businesses that will be directly benefit from this public-private partnership. And then, as Gary said, also a letter from the mayor is required. So this is our team, and we see the runway realignment project in the center, and we'll all be working together. I'll mainly be getting feedback and information from each of these agencies, and some of the questions are going to be real tight. It's like 250 words per answer. Some of them let us go 500 words. So it's a lot tighter of an answering process than I'm used to, so it will be a good challenge. The first application is due on March 25th, and again, it encourages collaboration and cooperation among the individuals and the organizations. And again, share the same goal, increase economic development and create positive change within the communities. So, as we move into the contest, after our application is submitted, our original one, They will choose 50 quarterfinalists, and each of those will receive $35,000, and you're expected to come together with a $15,000 match. We anticipate that that match will be money that the airport would be using already to work with their consultant, Mead and Hunt, but we haven't defined that clearly. We don't know if it can be in-kind services also, but before we would move forward and accept a commitment, we would have that outlined clearly and bring that forth to you. And that $35,000 with your matching funds is to develop a community revitalization plan. And really for this project, it's going to be a regional revitalization plan on the impacts of the airport. And it's not just about what the airlines do. And through this research that I've been doing while preparing to answer these questions, the impacts of the airport are a lot more than I actually realized. So it's going to be a good experience for me too. From that point, they go and they choose 15 semifinalists, and those 15 semifinalists will receive an all-expense-paid trip for 3 members to attend the summit. And it did not say where the summit is going to be held as of yet. And from that, then they will choose up to 8 finalists. And each of those 8 finalists will receive $100,000, and that is to bring their revitalization plan to life and share the plans and their story of how they got there along the way. The 3 grand prize winners will be named as America's Best Communities, and as Gary also said, there's a first, second, and third place, and that's $3 million, $2 million, and $1 million. So throughout this process of all the money they give away, it's close to the $10 million that we talked about. So ultimately, what we go through are 3 rounds, and the end result are 3 winners. The first application is due March 25th. There's 26 questions on there. Many of them are just about our area and our economics. There are 12 specific questions that talk about context and commitment, economic development, and our community identity. And then there is a set of criteria that it goes with each of the sections. So this is a diagram showing kind of the process that we're going to go through, as I just explained, the 50 quarterfinalists, then 15 semifinalists, 8, and then 3. So the first period of time from when we submit the application goes rather quickly. They'll make those announcements by April 29th. And then you're given time to develop your community revitalization plan, and then the 15 semi-finalists are announced in January of 2016. And then from there, they choose the 8 finalists, and those are announced in April of 2016. And you receive your $100,000 for implementation funds. And then from that point forward, you move on to implement the plan, and those 3 winners are selected in April of 2017. I'm just going to kind of go through this slide quickly. The community revitalization plan is focused on economic development, and within that you have to present a 6-month budget outlining the use of cash award and the community matching funds, and then also create a budget on how you would spend the $100,000. And again, our project is the expansion of the airport runway and the impact that will have on our region. As we talked about before, the 50 communities will be selected from the initial pool. The scoring criteria then for that program, for that section of the contest, is context and commitment, community identity, economic development, and vision and impact. And this just goes forward to describe a little bit more about the application process and the 3 team members. And one of the keynote factors in the directions I noticed, it says that at least half of the 15 semifinalists will come from rural communities. So that was one of the reasons that we were chosen as a Tiger II Award, is because we're a rural community. So I like that. The judging criteria, again, goes back to community engagement, long-term vision and strategy, and then short-term tactics. and then you have to implement those as being one of the 8 finalists. And they want you to make sure that you're a sustainable community, and so they go through a process of questions and answers that you have to fill out as you move through that process. The finalist round, you have to do 10 unedited raw GoPro videos. So they provide you with those GoPros, I'm sure. So they want you to document your progress. You have 3 quarterly reports that include metrics and expenditures, and then a final report capturing your 11-month time frame. And if you're selected, you also have to make a commitment to do public events, storytelling, and complete a winner's agreement. Let's see. So we're back to the very end now. Along with the first, second, and third prizes, the top winner would receive an original outdoor mural depicting the vibrancy and resiliency of the community painted by a local artist. And they said a sign identifying the city, I put as the region, as America's best community, and commit to 12 months of storytelling, including press releases, press events, and participation in other PR events to share best practices. So that is the process. And we don't exactly at this point have the full team defined. We'll wait until we see if we're one of the 50 finalists of who will work on this project with Gary and I and Gina.
As I noted as well, the City of Pullman, Mayor Johnson has indicated he's supportive of this process. But we've not received confirmation of that yet. He's attended our meetings, so I expect that we will be getting something in the next few days. But we're prepared to go ahead, and we believe that it's a good project.
One thing I'd like to do, Elise, and I don't know if that was the end of your presentation, you're ready for questions, but I'd like to, Martin Erkla, who is the General Manager of Frontier Communications for Moscow Pullman area, is here tonight, and I'd like him to make a comment too, because the council may very well have questions for Martin. Would that be okay at this time? Martin, would you please come up and state your name and your position, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, and City staff. I'm Martin Erkla. I'm the General Manager for Frontier Communications. I have an office up at 509 South Howard here in town. And thank you for letting me give you some additional background. Frontier is very proud to be offering this program. To give you a little background, Frontier believes in a program that we call local engagement. Unlike most telecommunications, our company mandates their managers and employees to give back to the communities that we serve. And we do that in a variety of ways by serving on boards and committees, school boards, those kinds of things, by donating our time and money to various organizations and activities in the communities that we serve. And all that does make a difference. It makes a tremendous difference in the communities that we serve. But about a year ago, our CEO, Maggie Wilderotter, was attending a conference of other CEOs in Las Vegas, Nevada. And she got up and she spoke about stimulating local economies across the United States, not waiting for the government to do it, but trying to get private enterprise to be engaged in the communities that they serve. And she got up in front of a podium of about 100 or so CEOs and just started talking about this concept of America's best communities. And she basically explained the program the way Alyssa did today. And I got to see some of the video of that, and it was kind of interesting because when she got done speaking and asked for questions, all you could see in the audience is other CEOs turning to each other saying, "Why didn't we think of that?" And so the program got launched. One of our major partners and vendors is Dish Network. We went to them and said, "Hey, would you be willing to partner with us?" And so that's how the concept got born. We wanted to put some serious money in the pot so that communities could take a look at a long-term revitalization and not just a small project that's easily sustainable to a certain extent but doesn't really share in growing the vision of a community. And with up to $3 million, that's some serious money to be invested in the infrastructure, in the social fabric, those kinds of things for the betterment of the communities that Frontier serves. There has to be an economic stimulus part of that, but that's a very broad-based category. It can be such things as diverse as teaching the underprivileged how to write resumes or how to make a job offer, how to go through interviews, all the way up to what we're talking about tonight is trying to really jumpstart the airport expansion. And when the program was first laid out to me last July, this is the first thing I thought of was the need for the airport expansion. I'm fortunate to be able to serve on the Latah Economic Development Council, and that's our charter is to help grow the economy on the Palouse, and that the airport is absolutely vital to that. You look at some of the things that, besides just passenger transport, that's important to us, but MedStar is there. We've got a variety of businesses. You look at the universities and the money that their sports and athletic teams and their professors and their researchers bring into this community, the restaurants, the motels, those kinds of things. So an airport is one of those basic pieces of infrastructure that's absolutely vital to a growing and vibrant community. So when I heard about this program, I started talking to a few people and said, what do you think? First off, is this something that could be of interest to the citizens of the Palouse? And what do you think about going after the airport expansion? I've sat in these chambers and listened to some of the support and some of the discussions about how do we fund that. And with some money, if we can get into the final rounds of the America's Best Community, then Frontier can help offset some of that economic problem that we're going to have trying to fund this. So I'm excited about it. I look around the Palouse, I see two major universities, I see two vibrant communities, I see two counties, I see two states, all committed to trying to make the airport thrive. That's a unique story across the United States. You take that story and then you leverage all the world-class resources we have here. You look at the chambers and the videos that we make trying to entice people to come here and spend some time with us. You look at the universities that have just metrics and studies and assets and resources to help really build our application going forward with this thing. And I'm here to tell you, as of this morning, there's about 145 communities out of roughly 300 that qualify in the Frontier footprint across our serving area. We've got an excellent chance of going a long ways in this contest. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that the $35,000, the $100,000, and then the $1 million, $2 million, or $3 million is all accumulative, so that if you get one prize and you make it to the next level, you get to kind of boost your points, if you will, and go from there. When we get to the final three rounds, Frontier steps aside and we have an independent panel that's going to be listening to the applications and then judging them based on their merits. So Frontier doesn't have a horse in this race. We'll step back and let an independent panel make the final decision. And also about a month ago, we felt we needed to have a national spokesman. And so we were looking around trying to find somebody that we felt could really espouse the virtues of Frontier and our mission statement and our values. And we were able to get Vince Gill, the country and western singer, to sign on. So he's fully endorsed the program, and you'll see some things in the media talking about his involvement with the program as well. Since we partnered with Dish Network, Coag Bank has signed on. They're going to kick some money into the pot. The Cisco company is talking about providing the winners along the way with some of their products, so that will help build some of the infrastructure and empower those that make it to the next rounds. And so there's a lot of really neat things happening here. And to Alyssa's point about how do you make a video with GoPro raw footage, GoPro, that corporation, has decided that they'll kick in some cameras and stuff as well. So it's a way of capturing some excitement. It's a way of looking at communities and have them really start looking at long-term vision instead of just a short-term 6 months, 1 year, 2 year kind of a program. Our hope is that, well, I have several hopes. Personally, I don't see any way the Palouse can't win. Okay, we've got it here. We're gonna make this happen. We're gonna give it everything we got, and I'll assist in the process as much as I can. But I would really like to see Frontier continue this program in the future. I think it really has some value to not only the companies, the communities that we serve, but also I think it can act as a model for other private industry to do the same thing, to give back to those communities that companies serve. So that's kind of an off-the-cuff talk about ABC. I would entertain any questions if you may have any.
Okay, questions for Morton? Well,
Thank
thank you for that presentation, Morton. Okay, Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you.
So uniquely today, when I was looking for a picture of to put with this presentation, I looked up the website for the environmental assessment, and on the on the runway landing is an airplane that has the name Frontier on the side of it, and I'm like, okay. When did Frontier land here? But I think it was just, a coincidence in the process here, but that was quite unique to it. So I don't know if it was a private chartered Frontier plane or what, but here we are looking to Frontier to help us with this project, and the name of their plane, the name of their business is on a plane sitting on the runway of the airport. So anyhow. We have a motion before you tonight, and that is approve the City of Moscow to act as the lead agency in preparing the submittal information for the ABC Prize campaign application and to coordinate the contest activities for the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport.
I'd make that motion.
Okay, John made the motion,
I would be happy to second it.
and Art made a second. So what we have here is a motion to approve the City of Moscow act as the lead agency in preparing the submittal information on the ABC Prize contest campaign application and to coordinate the contest activities for the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport, or take such action deemed appropriate, which is approving the application. Motion made by John, second by Art. You guys, any discussion before we vote on this thing? Walter?
Yeah, I will vote for this, but a question for Gary. Have you done any cost analysis of what this is going to cost the city to work our way through this?
Actually, we've not. Elisa, we've talked about the time it will take to go into it. City of Pullman is committed to doing as much as they can as well. But no, I don't have any hard numbers for you. Elisa indicated that it will take some time to do so. Did you have your hours you estimated?
I estimated this first round to be somewhere around 40 hours to prepare the application.
And looking at it, one of the good things about this contest as well, it does have a lot of upside, but also you'll know if you made the first round within 8 weeks. So if we make it, great. If we don't, we'll know it pretty quickly.
And I'm really hoping the next time I'm here to talk to you about this will be shortly after April 29th, telling you that we're one of the 50 finalists and our steps from there. So thank you.
Dan, you had?
Yeah, I guess, so after that 8-week period, that's when you'll put your team together that you mentioned earlier. So, and then, we talk about how we're the lead agency, but is the chamber I guess, what is their title? As it said, you had to have a nonprofit they'll become the lead agency then, or how does that?
The application requires that it's submitted by the lead agency, which is the chamber. And then it has point of contacts. So at this time being, Gina and I are listed in there as point of contact. We're not exactly sure what the process will be like once the first 50 finalists come together, but it will be a collaborative then project where the chambers will come together, the airport, Mead and Hunt, who are the consultants for the airport, have offered to support us in any way we need. And EMSI has also offered to provide us data that we need. And so I see it being as a collaborative project. I'm not quite sure what type of application or information it will be, a community revitalization plan, but the parameters on how that needs to be put together, I'm not quite sure of yet.
And to answer your question, Dan, there are some tax ramifications in how the money is awarded, and so one of the rules is that the money will be passed through to a 501c3 organization, which the chamber has agreed to do, and then they can disperse it from there. So,
thank you.
We did also think about there could be some tax implications for the chamber, and we will plan for that ahead of time with an audit or whatever is needed with that amount of money. If we are to go the full way, I think it would be right around $4 million, or what did we decide, $3,135,000? So that's the goal. Thank you.
Well, with that, I guess I will start the roll with Walter.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we got a 6-0 to move forward with this, and it'll be kind of exciting to see. One thing about it, we're going to do it in 60 days where we sit. So I hope you do report back. That first council meeting in May would be terrific to see where we sit on this. So thank you for all the hard work. Thank you, Martin Erkla, as well as our chamber. And this is a collaborative effort amongst a bunch of folks. Nobody can do anything singularly, and this is the sort of a thing that I really like to see as communities get together. And as a region, this is what we're trying to achieve anyway. So thank you very much, all. Okay, with that, I guess we're ready to move on to reports.
Yes, we are.
And I will start with Dan.
We pretty much covered everything for the administrative committee. Couple things that were in the, or at least one thing that was in the consent agenda is the child safety seat program, and we approved that to continue with replacing and helping people with proper installation of their child safety seats and a lot of that happens at the Newville Safety Fair, along with a couple other things around town. And other than that, all of my committees meet the next couple weeks. So.
Okay.
I do want to say one other thing, though. Keep an ear to the ground for Keep the Beat, Moscow. Something's coming. That's all I'll say right now.
Say that again.
Keep the beat?
Keep the beat, Moscow.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to Art.
Yeah, Fair and Affordable Housing meets this coming Thursday, so I'll have a report from them. A good number of us up here at the podium are going to be taking off to D.C. this next week for the National League of Cities meeting. You and Walter, myself, and Gary all heading back east. And big news last week was at the URA meeting where the board heard presentations from 3 very good applicants and finally wound up coming down with the Sangria proposal for development of the corner of 6th and Jackson as part of the URA, and so that process is now moving forward as well.
Okay. Walter?
Thank you, Mayor. On February the 19th, I attended the PBAC meeting, the monthly regular meeting, where several items were covered. One was Steve Robichon, the executive director of PBAC, had been questioned by one of the local newspapers about some of the water use measurements, and he went into some length about the fact that the report that PBAC does is data taken from wellhead meters. We don't know what happens to it after that once it goes into the city systems, but he went through some speculation about what might be affecting some of the numbers. The group also looked at the Water Supply Alternatives Project, where we're putting out an RFP for engineers to work with us over the next couple of years to pull together all the data that's out there regarding alternative water supplies other than groundwater for use in the Palouse Basin, and to try to come up with some quantitative way to measure those possibilities. The other thing that occurred at that was that Scotty Cornelius, who had filed a lawsuit regarding the Washington State University's use of their water rights for the new 18-hole golf course over in Pullman, explained about that and the fact that to this point he's lost through the Supreme Court. He didn't indicate whether or not he planned to appeal. I would guess possibly not. We also looked forward to what I attended with several others here, the February 24th adjudication workshop, when the IDWR, Idaho Department of Water Resources Executive Director Gary Spackman came and spent 2 or 3 hours here, a couple of hours here with us, and members of the public and others that were interested in explaining the adjudication process that's moving into the Palouse Basin. The basin itself goes from Cow Creek down just south of Genesee, all the way up to, I think it's the Benewah County line, and it's primarily in western Latah County, not eastern. But it's larger than the basin, the aquifers that we work out of, and property owners will be getting notices in the mail, whether you live in town or out. If you own property in Latah County in that basin, you will be getting a notice that adjudication has arrived and how to follow up if you wish to file a water right claim. Also with us was Judge Wildman, who is from Twin Falls, who has been designated as the water adjudication judge in the state of Idaho. He's handled part of the one down in the Snake River Basin. He's also handled the one up in this Coeur d'Alene area, St. Mary's area, and he will be handling this one. So a lot of good information, kind of got us up to speed on what's happening. We were a little surprised when we were advised by Mr. Spackman that he was going to include in his budget as he went before JFAC at the legislature this month, or in February, that he would be asking for authority to start that process. The state's already decreed that this will happen. The first step in his process is to get funding to do it. So that is starting. We will know soon whether or not the legislature sees fit to provide the funding. It's a zero cost in terms of additional dollars. He's using dollars that are already in his budget, but he has to designate it as such. So that will be occurring. And then I attended also the U of I Jazz Festival the last 4 nights last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm jazzed right up to here. A good turnout, a lot of good music, a lot of school buses moving around Moscow with names of communities on them. You have to think about where is that. They had people from far away up in Canada, out of Seattle, South Idaho. Brings a lot of dollars into the community. Gina left before I got to talk about this. A lot of good dollars into the community that we don't get otherwise. So a good event for Moscow. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. Wayne.
But one item on Public Works and Finance that did not come to council. It has to do with our wastewater treatment plant improvements, the Phase 5 study, and the preliminary work that's been done on working towards cooling of the water to reach the correct temperatures within Paradise Creek. And 2 studies were done utilizing a cooling tower as well as utilizing wetlands. And as it turned out, neither one of them, alone or combined, will get the job done. At least in the particular study, there's, depending upon naturally the temperature during the July and August periods of time as to whether we can get below the mean temperature that we're allowed within Paradise Creek. They had some problems with the wetland study and the fact that the area that they utilized hadn't been flooded for quite a while, so the plant growth was not there. It took a while to grow the plant growth back, and then temperatures kind of started coming down in that area. But the consensus was with the area that they used that that's probably not going to really get the job done. We indicated to them, that is Public Works and Finance, to take it back, and we received a report and asked them to extend their wetlands pilot project to a little bit larger area. One of the other things that could possibly happen is the state of Washington is looking at the possibility of reclassifying Paradise Creek. And if they reclassify it, then we may not come under the qualifications needed for the temperatures. So we're kind of not only in a waiting period trying to see what the state of Washington is going to do, but also continuing on with our wetlands project as well as using a cooling tower. With the cooling tower, they rented one or borrowed one for a month long to see how well that worked. And now don't get that confused with a chilling tower, because that's totally separate. That's the thing we don't want to have to use, is a chilling tower. That's really, really an expensive route to go. So they'll be doing another study over the next probably, Gary, a year, or so. I suppose that project's going to go through next summer, and then it'll come back and we'll see where we're at with that again. And that's really all I've got.
Okay. Jim.
The Clearwater Resource Conservation and Development Council met last Thursday, and Executive Director Drew Blankenbaker is resigning, but he was in attendance at the meeting, and he'll be assisting with transition as the search committee tries to find someone to replace him. That job closed yesterday for the first round of applicants, and they hope to have someone in place in that capacity by April 15th at the latest. The other major thing that happened at that meeting was it was voted to send out a request for a quote for helicopter services for the elk tagging project this summer. The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation funds that with $130,000, and so they'll be looking for the least cost helicopter service in order to carry that out and tag elk and study what happens to them in our area. So that's a good project. That's the main crux of what happened there.
Okay, thank you, Jim. John?
The Planning and Zoning met on February 25th, and they discussed the temporary use, the draft ordinance review, and the temporary use are things that are put on for retail in areas of the city that are not already used by businesses. And for example, the St. Mary's Christmas tree sale, that takes place on the Howard Hughes parking lot, so that doesn't fall into it. But what would fall into it would be the area that the hospital owns, where a outfit out of somewhere in Washington or Oregon came up this last summer and sold produce. And so doing the separation on those two, finding out which falls into it, what doesn't fall into it. And so the staff is going to bring clarified language to the next meeting. And then on the Legacy Crossing off-street parking draft ordinance review, at this point we've got an overlay parking and we've got regular parking, and they do not meet in the middle as they should. So the staff is trying to and will come up with a change so that the parking ordinance at Legacy Crossing will be consistent in all of the lots. Not a big deal. It sounds a whole lot bigger than it is, but it's being worked on. And then the accessory dwelling unit, there was a discussion about the deed restriction review, and basically what that does is let owners know that there is a deed restriction on any property that has got an accessory dwelling unit, and that you will have to meet the qualifications put on that if you do happen to have. And there's a list of qualifications that are essentially the same list that the original owner had to come up with. And they will be hearing a second review of those, and then the public hearing on the accessory dwelling unit, hopefully on March 11th. And the other two issues with the temporary use of the draft ordinance and then the Legacy Crossing will be a second review also on March 11th, and that's what I have.
Okay.
As far as the accessory dwelling unit restrictions, that has to do with the owner has to occupy one or the other of those things as a deed restriction, and when it changes, so that everyone knows at that time when it changes hands that you have to occupy one of those.
But there are a number of other conditions too, Jim. That's the reason I didn't. Well,
those conditions, once you get the public hearing,
they'll be out there.
They'll be Yeah, and
Sure.
it'll come right before us as well, so those will be things that will be
Absolutely.
discussed in depth, both by planning and zoning as well as this body up here.
But,
Okay.
yeah, Jim's right. Probably the biggest condition is that if you've got an accessory dwelling unit, you have to either live in the main dwelling unit or in that dwelling unit. You can't
Can't rent them both out.
Can't rent them both out.
Okay. Well, a couple of things. I want to talk a little bit about that water adjudication, which most of us did go to and attend on the 24th. And the thing that was, to get it down to the crux of things, they really in detail explained the process so that everybody would understand how things worked with adjudication. And I think that was a terrific way that they did it. Walter kind of talked about the technical things, but these guys, each one of them broke down how it worked and how it worked in other areas. And I thought that was pretty easy to understand and pretty straightforward, and how the process, one step goes to another step and so on and so forth. So everybody was there for that. I thought that was a well-ran meeting that we had. On the 25th, I had an airport board meeting, and then we talked about the usual things, and one of them was this ABC grant that we talked about tonight as well. And as Walter did, I attended the Jazz Festival, and I always like the Jazz Festival because it brings all kinds of excitement to our town. And, Walter talked about some of the economic things. Well, Sunday morning at Safeway, we had like 90 kids coming in between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, busloads of these kids from the Seattle area, and I got kind of a kick out of them. They're buying donuts and stuff in the deli, and bananas and pop and water and so on and so forth. So I got a chance to talk to a number of them. So we were one of the economic benefactors of that very thing, Walter. And then Art had mentioned the National League of Cities. He himself and Walter will be going, as well as myself and Gary Reedner, and that will be attending that this weekend and part of, 2/3 of next week, I guess. So with that, Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. We have some things. I'm glad the report on the adjudication was made. We have a couple things going on. Former City Council member Linda Paul will be having an art opening on March 5th, Thursday, from 5 to 7 o'clock. In City Hall here. It's called Farmers Market Reflections. She's had years of photographing the market, and it would be great if folks could come to that. Also, on another note, Linda is celebrating her 70th birthday on Wednesday. So if you would like, you'd join her at the 1912 Center and say hello, give her best wishes. Also on Wednesday, we have our monthly breakfast meeting at the Quiet Room at the Wallace Complex. And on Wednesday, I was out of the room for a moment, so I don't know if the council president announced it. The budget preparation or budget focus workshop, formerly known as the goal setting workshop, is set for Wednesday. This is an interesting process as we're plowing through our strategic planning. I don't think the council president nor I probably know exactly where this is going as we're transitioning, but we will have a report on where we are with last year's goals, and the staff has been hard at work putting together statements, what we call major challenge areas, and asking the council to give us some guidance on what we see as the major challenges from department to department, and asking for some guidance on policy from the city council. So I look forward to that process. Want to assure the council that we're plowing through it, but it is certainly not ready for prime time yet, so it'll be a bit of a transition. So looking forward to the council president guiding us through that process. And that will be from 2 to 6 on Wednesday.
I'll bring my blindfold.
With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Consider yourself entertained.
Second.
Second.
By Jim. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned 8:08.